04915. Isn't that new show on community TV?
It's more fun than watching Cartoon Network.
I saw that show last night. I thought it was pretty good.
I recommend that everyone see Mark's show. It is dynamite.
I never miss Mark's show.
Welcome everyone to another edition of 207-04915. We're going to be visiting today with a writer, poet, acupuncturist, and I imagine a few more other things. We'll find out. Her name is Elizabeth Garber, and I think you're going to enjoy the show. At least I hope so. Don't turn that dial. Hello there.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, how are you, Elizabeth?
He showed you my house.
The kitty wants to come in.
Hey, come on.
Well, let me follow this one.
All right.
Now,
my big fat boy kitty.
Who is this?
His name is Big Boy.
Big Boy. Oh, that's appropriate.
He is.
Maybe I should be called Tall Boy. Well, thanks for having us.
Well, this is so exciting.
You want me to close the door here?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's great to come visit a poet at home.
Look at the things not only on the wall, but look at that wall. I love the colors.
Yeah, I love
Cool.
warmth, and I love this color, and I kept making, I had milder versions, and I kept thinking, I have to get as strong as this color, and it just keeps you warm all winter.
It's wonderful. It's really, really nice. I love it. I love strong colors anyway.
Well, come sit down.
Okay. Here, let me just set this camera down somewhere.
All right.
So today you want to read us some poems?
Yeah, I thought I have all these poems that are centered in Belfast,
Yep.
and I thought I would start with poems that I wrote about here, and then
Okay.
I'd take you around town and downtown and to Chicken Hill.
Oh, that
and
sounds like fun.
Here we go. So I thought, people always love.
Where's Chicken Hill?
Oh,
Where's
it's
that?
the old where all the chicken plant used to be.
Oh,
it's the
okay.
Belfast Park.
Oh, where the park is now.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
And at readings, people always love the little story, but I thought, and a lot of times people read my poems and they go, I think I know exactly where you were when you read. So I thought, now we'll take people exactly where I was.
So they can visualize. So
Right,
that visualization will go true.
Right,
Oh, that sounds like
right.
fun. Okay. We should let folks know a little bit about you first, I suppose. I mean, that's like the standard procedure,
Yeah,
right?
right,
with these shows.
right.
No, we don't have to do that because we don't have to do what's always been done. But for folks who don't know you, I mean, because the show's going to be all over the state. I mean, I'll be sending the show out everywhere.
Okay.
Should I just let you, I mean, what would you say about yourself? Isn't that hard?
No, well, what's
Or
great
not?
is
Or maybe not. Maybe it's easy to you.
I grew up in a little village in Ohio,
You
and
did?
when I got
Okay.
to Belfast 25 years ago, I went, this is home. It reminded me of where I grew up, but seems to be the place where everybody who was unusual and creative and a little eccentric, we all came here and we suddenly fit, and I felt like I finally fit in.
Yeah, that goes back to, I mean, how far, you said 25, I mean...
I was the 85 migration.
Okay, this is the second one maybe.
Right,
or
where I
maybe-
think
or
there are
maybe
all
the
these
third.
migrations, because there was the 70s, mid-70s, late 70s,
Right.
early 80s, so I was the 85 migration.
Okay.
I lived out in Brooks for 14 years and had my kids grow up there, and then we moved to town. My kids and I moved to town.
Right, okay.
Or they got to be with their dad in the country and me in town and have that balance.
A little bit of both.
And walk to school.
Yeah, even though
It was really important to me.
folks in a real city will get a chuckle out of that because
Right.
you say, you know, we get to live in the urban space and then like we live in the rural space, but it's not really urban, really.
Right,
but,
right.
Okay, so So I have to ask why Belfast? I mean, everyone from away. It's like why Belfast? How did it end up in Midcoast?
I was living in San Francisco, and I was had practiced
were.
my first year of acupuncture there.
Yeah.
And I thought, and I was going to get married, and then I realized it wasn't the right thing to do. And actually, a friend of mine said, "Let's go to the top." We went to the top of the roof, right near Macy's, downtown San Francisco, Union Square.
Okay.
And she said, let's do this meditation. So we did this meditation, and and she said, have a vision of where you're going. And I saw a granite island and pine trees, and I went, Maine. I'm going back to Maine, where I'd never thought of it. But years before, I'd been looking for land and hadn't found it, and said, all right, I'm going to figure out how to make a living, and someday I'll come back. And then I'd forgotten about it.
So when was that very, very first time?
I came up during 2 summers during college. I was the upstairs maid and second cook at the Ford Estate on Mount Desert Island.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in Seal Harbor. And
wow.
And then I was a chambermaid in Bar Harbor one summer.
Yeah.
And then I would read the Maine Times, like my Bible.
This during college?
It was during college, so it was in mid-70s.
Yep.
So when people were arriving.
Right.
And I looked all over, and I thought I'd be a truck farmer or whatever, but I thought I need to figure out a way to do this. So I left, ended up becoming a carpenter, went to California, was a renovation carpenter, wrecked my health, went to acupuncture, and it so inspired me and made me feel so much better that I became an acupuncturist.
So that led you into that profession then? Yeah.
And when I first started getting treated with acupuncture, I started writing poetry.
What are the books that you've had self-published? Can you show those to us?
Yeah, the first one came out, I decided when I was 50, and I'd been writing poetry for all this long, that I thought, I'm ready to bring out a book of my poems. And it was incredibly successful. It sold out 1,000 copies. It paid for itself. I sent it off. Actually, I made money on it, and it actually paid for me to go to Buenos Aires with my daughter, who at 14 wanted to learn Argentine tango. So we went to Argentina, and the second collection of poems that came out a year later, the moment we got on the plane to Argentina, I just was inspired, and I just kept writing as we went. She did dance classes, I kept writing. I just started noticing and observing just an amazing culture, an amazing city. Oh, and then I thought, I'd give you a poem to give you a sense of my daughter in Argentina.
Okay.
I'll read you just a little bit of it.
And how old was she?
She was 14.
14.
She had been doing ballroom dancing since she was 11. At 11, she went, I need to learn ballroom dancing.
It just struck her.
It just struck her.
Yeah.
She's that kind of amazing girl. All right, where am I? My daughter at the Milonga. Milongas are these little tango clubs. 6 months before, my 14-year-old daughter had said, I want to learn Argentine tango more than anything in the world. Amazed, I answered, really? Well, I think that's the kind of thing you do when you go to college. But that line of hers stayed with me, working under the current of my days. Now I find myself in the crowded edge at El Beso, in the midnight smoky blue haze of this cozy small dance club. The dance floor is packed with men, dapper, in low double-breasted suits, and women sleek, bare backs crisscrossed with thin straps, flowing legs in silk, feet adorned in jewels of handmade shoes. My daughter is ready to dance. Stately and graceful beyond her years, 3 years of ballroom dance made her facile and quick with new steps, relaxing out of the rigid, arching back frame of American tango. She has softened into this very different stance, stepping cautiously into this first night to dance in close embrace. I'll skip ahead. The first man catches her eye, comes up, bowing his head slightly. She glances back a moment at me, and then they are off to the floor, entering the slow, moving, circling of bodies, dissolved into an architecture of movement. I see her for moments through the figures, her hair glinting golden, her face uplifted, her skirt twirling as she turns and follows. They pause between dances. She chats in Spanish, saying she's from a little town of 6,000 in Nueva Inglaterra, before they dance again until the series is over, when she is returned to me. The night plane to Buenos Aires. The moment we step into that sea of faces, we know the climate has changed. It was as if someone had turned the volume up on aliveness, on vibrancy in the eyes. Face after face looking into us, a warmth suffusing the air, an air of such personality, even before we get to our seats, I am already wondering, who would I have been if I had been born in this culture? I sink into my seat, my heart pounding. So well, how about we walk around Belfast and I'll read you some poems that I wrote in different locations in Belfast.
That sounds great. Where to first?
I thought maybe we'll just start in my kitchen. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read you just little pieces of poems.
Okay.
And part of Maine is that we're so about where we live in our home and our kitchen. So the poem is all about what we need to do to get through the winter.
Okay.
And then one section is, we need to stock the root cellar with enough ball jars of canned ripe peaches to open the remembrance of sunlight into cold winter days. We need to stock up enough captivating books to draw us expectantly under our deep covers for the long winter night. We need to know enough warm kitchens we can step into where arms will embrace us and warm voices will rise to surround us. We need to engage in enough good work that will grasp us strongly and work us hard and well on days we can't bear another storm. We need enough points of contact so that our hold in the storm will be enough to make it through. So we'll leave the kitchen, and I thought we can go out to the back deck. So one March, I went shopping at TJ Maxx with my daughter down in Rockland. It was this dreary day, and then we just started having so much fun trying on things, and she had brought out all these beautiful summer dresses. I went, what are we doing summer dresses? But I put on this dress, and I went, I have to get this dress. I have to have a garden party. So later that summer, and then I had a deck built, and then I put in gardens, and then I went, all right, so I have to invite people to come and visit the deck. And then I had Marianne Driscoll, Belfast's own amazing improvisational pianist, and she came. So I moved my piano out here, and she played, and people were all around the lawn and on the deck. Fun. So I wrote a poem about that day. Okay. There are days that become little legends in the history of a summer, signposts. Each of us placing ourselves where we were the night the moon came out after weeks of rain, when the misty meadows were lit by fireflies, tracing streams of light. There was the day the double rainbows dipped into the ocean, and the day in town when people heard music coming out of the trees and they went searching for it. The piano was on my back deck, graced with lilies. Our friends dressed in summer's elegance, and Mary Ann's keys were liquid silver over the... Mary Ann's hands were liquid silver over the keys. When she sang an aria from the Marriage of Figaro, her arms extended out, sewing through the branches into the calm, cloud-scalloped sky of early evening. One woman remembered shouting bravo at La Scala, and the men remembered the women they had always loved. I love when a poem ends with So I thought, now you're here at the perfect time. My garden, I have to take you to my garden.
Oh, I would love to see it.
All right. We'll go through here.
Okay.
So here we are in coming out to my garden. When I moved here 10 years ago, it was just a wreck, and I had a farmer come and plow it, and then except for these two bushes along here, I planted everything, and it's now in full gorgeous dream.
It is. It's beautiful.
All right, so we can come in.
Entering a circle.
I know. I thought, in a way, it's like a little room in town.
Uh-huh.
And when my son was turning 18, I thought, what do I do for my son at 18? What would be really important? I thought, I want to write him a poem. So I wrote this poem.
What a more appropriate, is that a more appropriate gift from a mom who's a poet?
I know. So I gave you stories and gardens. I gave you stories and gardens and traveling quietly together. And I wrote first about when we lived in Brooks. And then he loved to be read to, so I wrote about the books we read and listened to.
Yeah.
And then here's the part. I gave you gardens. Everywhere I live, gardens emerge out of the landscape. Pregnant with you, I planted apple trees and poppies beside the marsh stream and brooks. When you were 4, we began new gardens together. We called the roots dragons as we wrestled every wily tail out of the old rock wall, creating new gardens next to the meadow high on the hill. When you were 9, you discovered the joys of tree pruning. We'd stand back to look before we chose which next branch to cut to shape the star magnolia. Now you examine my new gardens in town near the sea, letting me know what you think I need to prune. So there's a walk that I do, that I used to do every day, and now I'm back doing it again, where I walk down to the ocean. And I used to carry paper in my pocket and a pen and write as I went along, or stop and have ideas, or compose a haiku as I went. So I have a couple of poems I've written at different stages of walking through town, so I thought we can go to different places.
Okay.
All right.
So I get the impression from you, Elizabeth, that you're quite a walker, that you enjoy walking. And
I love walking.
Walking is,
I used to get up at 5 and walk every morning, and then as my heart was getting worse, I couldn't. It's a tougher hill than you realize, and I used to just bound down and bound back. So I have these poems about going down to the water. And then when we get to the crest of the hill and you suddenly see the whole bay, it's just so magic. Every day it's so magic.
And you're finding inspiration as you walk. Walking
yeah.
is one of your vehicles, if you will, or mechanisms by which it generates thoughts.
A lot of times when I don't have an idea or I'm stuck on something, when I'm walking, ideas will come and fit together.
Okay.
Or we can go over here.
Okay.
Yeah, or I'll hear stories through a day and I'll put pieces together. Or when I'd walk along the bay and I'd notice something, and then I was composing haiku for a long time, and they would just come as I'd walk along, and haiku were an easy form to keep in my mind and carry home.
Okay. And haiku again is
the little Japanese form of
number of lines.
3 lines.
3 lines.
5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables.
Okay.
And also,
can you think of one just off the top of your head?
Oh, I'll find you a little.
Do you have one to read
I have
for
one
us?
to read for us.
Okay.
It was a day when Venus was crossing the sun, and warm scent of lilacs snuggling into my hair, summer's first kisses. And what's great, walking is a perfect way to compose haiku, because you can just work over the syllables and switch in other words and try to get it to work out right, and then arrive back home with a haiku. It's just a lovely...
Do you set the syllables with your footsteps? Is that part, is your body movement part of the
I bet it
composing?
is. I think the body moving loosens up the mind and opens you to more experience, and then you see things differently, and it really... There's only so much you can do when you're not moving, but once you get moving, a lot can happen. Or I can figure out, oh, I can do this in a chapter. I get a lot of inspiration when I'm out moving or walking or hiking.
So different from a sedentary reflectiveness.
Yeah, they're both a good...
active reflectiveness.
Yeah.
It's similar, but it has its own unique qualities.
Yes,
maybe.
yes.
Interesting. Okay.
And Belfast is the most gorgeous. Belfast is a continuous garden. I love watching every garden as I walk by and seeing what it's doing today as compared to yesterday, and going, oh, how things are filling in. This one, oh, and these red.
This is beautiful.
Oh my God, these red lupins are so beautiful. Actually, when I was Poet Laureate, I had 2 different people call me up saying, I really think as Poet Laureate, I think you should come and see my garden, and I think you might want to write a poem about it. It was so cute.
Yeah, it is.
Because someone had this magnolia, and she said, I've never seen another magnolia like this in Maine. I think you want to... So I went and saw it, and then I went and saw this other garden, and then I wrote a whole poem while I was Poet Laureate, and I was
So
writing...
when was this?
Tell
us when you were Poet Laureate.
2006.
2006.
I was the Poet Laureate of Belfast.
Okay.
And
Now,
I created a column for the papers, and
You did.
so every week I decided if I didn't know much about all the different Maine poets, most other people wouldn't either. So I spent a whole year gathering poems and books from all the poets all over Maine that I could find. There are so many poets in Maine. I love how the seasons change so differently from week to week. And it affects us, and it affects how we're aware of things, and it affects how we think and feel. So I found 1 or 2 poems for each week. Like there was one set that I loved was, there was a woman watching her husband splitting wood, and she was cooking venison stew. That was her poem. And then there was a poem about a man feeling very satisfied stacking his wood, and they were by different poets. So, so every week of the year, you know, when the black flies came out, or when the or when the lilies start blooming, or the lupins, and so I wrote a poem about the forsythias being in bloom all over town and about visiting these gardens. So I put in a couple of my own, but mostly it was this treasure hunt of finding all these incredible Maine poets.
From all over the state.
Yeah, all over.
They must have greatly appreciated
People loved it.
Publishing their
because I'd go to poetry readings and I'd go, could I publish that poem in this article? And people, you want to publish my poem? So people would, or then I'd write to people and they'd go, you might not remember me, but you published one of my poems. It was so wonderful to be able to support.
What was the response of the paper? I mean,
people loved it.
Good.
And even I got the sweetest poem or letter from a woman who was doing the typesetting for the paper, and she said at first she hated doing the poems. It was just this drag. She said by the end of the year she was looking forward to them and she loved them. That was like.
That's great.
And some mornings I'd be out on my walk at 6:30 in the morning, and one morning I passed someone and he said, "Oh, good poem this week, Wesley McNair." I love Wes McNair's poem. He was a teacher on his way to work. So it was that. It gave me a really nice rapport. And part of the job of Poet Laureate was to support the awareness of and enjoyment of poetry. Lilac season is almost over, but there's a late blooming lilac, and we've got one in the park. And I have a poem about lilacs because Corinne Spitfire and I are both deep, serious lilac devotees, and we've both written poems about them. So I thought I had to find a lilac bush for reading my lilac poem. So it's just down here a little further.
I'm glad you found it.
So these are your instructions for next year when the lilacs come out. Take this vow. The first warm day when lilacs release their scent, stop going where you thought you were going. Take that first extravagant blossom of lilac between both your hands like your lover's face, drawing in the long, slow pull of that soft scent. Turn away from downtown and head down tree-lined streets searching. And then I talk about all over town there's the white lilacs, the old lilac, and then there are those deep purple lilacs, and then these are just so nice, so nice. And then this is bliss. Every spring, a beginner again. In the mornings when I come down the hill, one of my favorite things is getting to this spot, an invitation. Make of your kitchen a hearth where you warm and nourish your life. Make of the sky over your town your temple, where you refresh yourself daily. Make of the people in your town your beloved, to discover with kindness each day. Make of the earth of your town your own garden, where you gaze with attention each day. Make of your life a steady flame of delight. Look around you and see in this moment how all of it pierces us with pain and such happiness. The first group of poems I wrote in 2004, and it was a summer that it rained, or it didn't rain, it was fog every morning for the whole summer until August. And people were getting desperate and
probably after a long winter,
miserable, and we're going
a long spring of fog.
So and people go, why are there so many poems about the weather in Maine? But it's really this really important thing to all of us. So I wrote a whole series of little poems that were about that summer. And the first one includes Eunice from the hardware store, Eunice Palmer.
This must be...
And they're closed.
Oh, they are closed, yeah.
But we'll...
It must be after 5.
After 5.
Okay.
So we'll head up to the...
Let me get a shot
Trustworthy.
This is the local Trustworthy here in Belfast.
Home Supply. So as we come up to the... I'll read it as we go up. Summer Quintet. Still waiting for summer. It's the end of July. A patient told me the last visible sunrise she noted in her journal was July 7th. It's been fog every morning since. This misty morning, as I cross the street at what was once the only stoplight in Waldo County, I meet my feisty friend Eunice. Early 70s, her sight receding, a widow keeping her family business going. She greets me with such certainty and conspiratorial glee, We are so fortunate to live here. The fog really doesn't matter. It was like, wait, it was such a great revelation. It was like, right, the fog really doesn't matter. We are so fortunate. And when I was asked to write a poem about Mike Curley when he was retiring from being the mayor, I called him up and I said, could we have, meet and you can tell me some stories. I thought I wanted to gather some direct stories because I love stories. So he told me all about the center of town. So anyway, here we are at the center of town. So I was interviewing Mike Curley, and I thought I want to get his voice. So I called the mayor. Hey, you want a cup of coffee? We were sitting, I think, over in the pizza place. I just realized I've lived here nearly the last 30 years in spitting distance of this traffic light. From where we're sitting, you can see the cafe I used to run. I lived up in the Oddfellows Hall, and now my office is upstairs on this corner. I just never wanted to leave. Mind you, it was different 30 years back. I remember standing at the bar, and word was the police chief was on his way up after some underage drinkers. I said, I can solve that. I just took their drinks. But Roberta said, no way. She was 6'5", weighed 270 pounds. She was a big girl for 16. Worked down at the chicken plant. By the time we got to the door, she and the chief were in a big bear hug, rolling down the middle of Main Street. Then they were up, punching and fighting a half hour more under the traffic light. You really gotta love this town. And were you here by the time that high school kids stole a car, rounded the corner too fast and flipped, and the car was left in the middle of the intersection? That was something to see. And then he told me lots more stories, and then he ended, you want another cup? I better switch to decaf. The longer you live here, you hear everyone's story. Somebody's kid's sick, or they've got a new job, or your kid's gone off to Spain. I hear all the stories. After 30 years, some of the little kids I know are grandparents. But you know what the hardest thing is going to be? It's the next 20 years. I'm 56 now. Think about it. We're going to start going to so many funerals. Have you seen that bumper sticker? Old age is not for sissies. When you know everybody, you'll see them all go, or they'll see you go. The downside of living in a small town. But really, that's the beauty of being here. That's what I wanted.
So tell us a little bit about your business as an acupuncturist.
Well, I've been practicing acupuncture for 26 years, 25 here in Belfast. And what I love about it is essentially I get to listen to who people are and the story of their life, and then I get to feel the pulses of their life energy and restore to balance. And that if someone's all revved up or depressed or in pain or very sick or just not feeling quite who they are, the acupuncture helps balance it out so that people are returned to feeling like themselves again. I encourage people to take time to make sure they have dates with their partners and have fun times with their kids, but if they have an idea, oh, I want to draw, or I've always wanted to do this, then I make sure I encourage that, because what are we here for but to fully live? Right. So I feel like the practice of acupuncture is just to support people being more fully who they really can be in this lifetime. So I love going to work and seeing all the stories I get to hear and supporting people.
I imagine sometimes it's just the pain that they want to deal with, and that's what you...
So if someone just wants to do that, then I do that. And then other people, sometimes it's the symptom gets them in the door, but what's really an anguish is their life or their spirit,
that's what I was trying to get
or
at.
Something that happened, a death that happened years before that they haven't been able to recover from, or and that if you can bring some peace to someone's spirit, there's nothing better.
So I see a poem on your door.
Right.
What a coincidence.
What a coincidence. Well, I didn't even come up with a poem. Linda Buckmaster, who's now the Poet Laureate of Belfast, talked to Ariel Greenberg, who's a poet who's been living here for a year and a half on sabbatical. And they had the idea of, during Poetry Month in April, National Poetry Month, to go around and have poems in most of the downtown businesses. So Ariel had this great assignment to figure out a good poem. So at the shoe store, there's this poem still right here about a broken sandal. And the hardware store had a poem about a hammer. And Darby's had a poem about I think, the Love Cook or something.
Oh, really?
So Ariel picked out these fabulous poems.
What a great idea.
And then they got to go on, and a lot of people this year are just keeping them in the window.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is that going to be the start of a tradition, you think,
I think
year?
it will be. Ariel's leaving, or going back to Chicago, but I think we're going to keep going. Yeah, it's such a wonderful thing, and it gets people reading poetry.
Great idea. I love it.
Okay. I have a poem called In My Little Town this week. And it starts with leaving my house and coming down to Main Street and rounding the corner and seeing the town, and then going up to my office. At my office, the stories of lives and pain and healing rise up around me as I swim through their currents, like swimming this first warm week in July in Knight's Pond, sliding through the warm and cool layers while damselflies circle and dance and scatter across the surface. Threads of stories tying so many lives together, crisscrossing like smiles across the street and in the grocery store. We have known each other so long. And in midstream, a story pierces through. A friend's husband, just my age, a great wounded stag of a man, has dropped to his knees and died the night before. I find myself watching everything more closely now, lingering a little longer in each moment. The silhouette of the lobsterman standing in his boat heading out in the deep fog at 6 a.m. The woman in her 80s standing watching the bay, telling me that she's always taken her first swim on May 31st, yet it's been too cold this year. Today she thinks is the day for her first swim. And when the fog breaks and the blue sky appears, strangers stop on the street to admire the sunlight, talking like old friends. There we go. This summer, the little brief storm of rain is going by, and now we've got the sun just beaming through, and it's still pouring.
This is the greatest,
we have to go.
view. This is wonderful. We're standing under an awning at the moment trying to get out of this rain, but of course the sun is shining right on us.
And it's slowing down.
It's slowing down, and what a wonderful scene, if we can call it that.
And what's great is once you've been hearing poetry, you'll start seeing things and seeing them, oh, this could be in a poem. So part of the best thing is to inspire people to go, oh, this is like a poem. Oh, maybe I could write a poem.
Or it should be a poem.
Or it should be a poem.
Yeah.
And now we have to go looking for a rainbow.
Let's go. Okay. Okay, where is it now?
Oh, but it's so fine you won't be able to see it.
Well.
But there are what? Oh, maybe it'll get darker.
Okay, let's walk up closer. I love how your first thought when the rain came was, there's going to be a rainbow. I love it.
Well, I went through a long period being depressed, and when I came out of that, acupuncture brought me out of a deep depression. And hi. And one of the things that I learned about acupuncture got my brain thinking other ways and opening to possibility. And then I had a meditation assignment for a year to, instead of going, oh no, with each thing, to go, oh, what's possible? And for a year I had this assignment to just go, oh, what's possible? And what's the opportunity? And it shifted how I see things. So when people come for acupuncture, they'll say, oh, I have all these terrible things going on. And I go, great, let's hear them all. I want to hear all of them, and then we'll start bringing your life more alive.
Make the possibilities happen from there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a conscious decision to train yourself to see life in another way.
I didn't know it would happen. And then I found a number of years ago, 20 years ago, I found these 4 lines. It's a opening the heart of compassion practice. And it's so simple. It's, may I dwell in the heart. May I be released from suffering. May I be healed. May I live in peace. And I've sometimes said that 30 times a day, on a day that I'm really struggling, or I'm scared, or somebody's sick, and I'll say it for them. I say it for myself. I say it for my kids. And that also has shifted how I think and how I see people. Because ultimately, I think we're to go through the world and see everyone as if they're people in our little town, and to see them with love and compassion. And to see when someone's struggling, or if we're struggling, to have compassion for ourselves. So,
a lot of lessons there.
Yeah. All right. And I think the rainbow's gone now, but the sun's back.
The sun is back. It's a beautiful day again.
It is.
So there is the rainbow.
We found
See
it.
if I can zoom in on it, folks, and catch it for you. There it is.
One night I was walking down Church Street after work, and the full moon was coming up in the middle, and it was right there, and I had to walk down the middle of the street, and people were walking this way, and I said, you have to come out in the street, you have to see the full moon. And I thought, maybe that's what poets do. They make people go out and walk down the middle of the street. That's what I love about a small town, is walking down the middle of the street.
And it's perfectly doable.
It's perfectly doable.
And they don't scream at you to tell you to get out of the road.
Right. Oh, it's just incredible.
So are you going to share another poem with us?
I am. I thought, I'll tell you a funny story.
Okay.
I was, part of that, I had this assignment to write in iambic pentameter, like in Shakespeare.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought in 5th or 6th grade, where you're supposed to learn about that, and then high school you're supposed to learn about it and learn how to scan a poem, I thought, I don't have a clue how to do that. I couldn't do it then, and then I was terrified of this class, and I thought, how am I going to do this? And I thought, and then the teacher said, well, listen to how people speak. A lot of people speak fairly naturally in iambic pentameter.
Huh.
So I was thinking how to do it and what to write about, and I had driven over to Blue Hill to get acupuncture, and I was coming back, and my car started smoking and spewing stuff, and I had to stop on the side of the road, and I had this tow truck driver come and pick me up, and he brought me back to Belfast. So he was the best tow truck driver, and he started telling stories. And he told, and I said, all right, what was your worst tow? And he went, have I got a story for you? So he starts telling me the story, and midway through I said, do you mind if I take notes? Would it be all right if I wrote a poem about this? So I wrote this poem. It was in this little collection that I just had for Christmas presents, but I sent it to Garrison Keillor anyway, and he put it on the radio.
Oh, really? Now this is the Garrison Keillor.
Garrison Keillor read this for the Writer's Almanac on NPR. So this is called The Tow Truck Driver's Story. You meet all kinds of people in this work. You have to be polite 24 hours a day. It was a brutal winter night. I'd worked since 4 a.m., finally coming in to sleep when the phone rang. A guy calling from up on Appleton Ridge, saying he needs a jump. I asked, can it wait? There's still snow on the roads, the plows aren't through. It'll take me 3 hours at least to get up there with the roads like this. Okay, he said, I'll wait. I went to bed an hour before he called. It's an emergency. The storm had eased as I headed out, but the wind had been so bad I had to stop and climb over drifts to knock the snow off signs to see where to go. The long, hard ride up to Appleton Ridge. Over 3 hours to get to a lonely country farmhouse, light glowing brightly. Then a man in, I kid you not, a red satin smoking jacket comes out and he waves. And I think, he's waving to me. And I wave back, but it's a garage opener. And out of the dark, a door rises, lit like a museum. A car, glittering white and chrome beauty. It was a 1954 Mercedes Gullwing.
Oh my.
You ever heard of them? I think they made 10 of them. I bet it was worth $1 million. I asked, are you going to take that out? Oh no, we just got back from Jamaica. I want to jump to make sure it's okay. It starts like a dream, purrs dangerously. Oh good, he says, and walks away, waving his arm to close the door, never saying a word, left me standing there in the dark.
Wow.
And then it got on the cover of the Camden Herald.
Oh,
and then I suddenly started thinking, who was this written about?
that is, well, a wonderful poem, an amazing
story. I love, stories are just waiting there to be put into poems.
So you have this kind of, this skill, this bag of tricks, these techniques that you use when something happens. And I just think that, you know, one of the wonderful, magical things about poets is they
gather those pieces and those
have
threads.
this way of taking this thought or this fleeting image and turning it into something tangible for others to try to understand.
Yeah, you're taking a moment that's a personal experience for you, or a moment that just stands out, and then you illuminate, like the light shining on that house right now. It's like that house is suddenly lit up and you see it in a different way. And when you're writing a poem, it's like a situation or daily life. You suddenly see it in a different way and you write about it. And in a way, it's like you've gone into this intense personal experience and then you open up that possibility for someone else too. And some people will enter your poem, some people won't, but they may enter the next poem. In a way, poems, one of my teachers says you need a gatekeeper who will open up the world of poetry, and then you suddenly know how to open the door and go in. And it's a very powerful thing. My favorite thing to do before going to sleep is reading poetry, because of that opening up into other worlds and other awarenesses.
Neat.
All right.
Okay, let's start to head back.
This is so fun because we're making it up as we go along, and things happen, like a rainstorm.
So was there another poem that you wanted to?
Oh, I was thinking, yeah, I have this poem. A friend of mine, actually my colleague, my acupuncturist colleague, told me that about the leaf of happiness, that if you catch an autumn leaf before it hits the ground, you'll get a month of happiness. He had been down walking along the ocean, and he saw a tree sigh. He said, like a mother settling into a chair after their child leaves home. And he said, that tree dropped. He said, I ran around, I caught 3 years of happiness. And he gave me one of the leaves.
Oh, cool.
So after that, I started walking all around Belfast, and it was in the fall. So I came up to this oak tree, and I love this oak tree. I walk under it every day, and during the winter, the oaks still have their leaves up. And they don't drop. So I wrote in this poem about searching. It's called How to Position Oneself in Regards to the Leaf of Happiness. And it's all about wandering around Belfast trying to catch a leaf.
Before you start, I'll just say one thing. Just that this image just flashed before my mind. Years ago, when my daughter was younger, I remember spending an hour in the fall, her and I running around the backyard, catching leaves as they were falling.
And we had so much fun. So magic.
It is.
Yeah, one time I was down near the Episcopal Church, and this friend of mine and I were running and grabbing and and people going by. And I said, we're catching leaves of happiness. So I passed the great oaks, fully clothed in their rich brown leaves, knowing they will not relinquish their grip until the last snow of winter. And I was coming down Church Street, and there was a leaf on Church Street where they still had green and red leaves, even though there was already snow on the ground. And I passed the rare tree, still glistening in reds and greens, and no, it's too vibrant to give up any of its happiness. And then I pass under a branch and look up to see a tiny, almond-shaped golden leaf and a single seed pod, luminous against the pearly gray-blue sky. And that solitary, still life gives me all the happiness I need.
Nice.
So, all right. Oh, we'll come up to some lupin up here, and I'll read you a poem that has lupins in it.
Okay.
I had the coolest thing happen, I think a couple of months ago. I got an email out of the blue of someone whose wife had found my book of poems, and she had read them, and then she'd taken them to her poetry group in Hingham, Massachusetts, and they actually invited me down and to read. And he wrote to me, and he said he's a painter and a photographer, and who goes to Great Sprucehead Island in the summer and also goes up to a camp in northern Maine. And he wants to do a big, beautiful coffee table book of images of Maine. And he wants my poems with him and stories. So I'm going through and finding all my Maine poems, and lots of I haven't published, and I'm going through and editing them and grouping them, and also having stories. So when I worked as an upstairs maid and second cook in Seal Harbor when I was 19, I wrote letters to my grandmother. So I'm going to have a series of stories from those letters, great stories about Homer the caretaker, so I'm really excited about. So I'm going to have a week out at Great Sprucehead Island this summer, going through and grouping and editing and revising those poems, and then handing them to him so that he can do paintings and photographs that connect with the images in the poems.
Oh, that's really nice. Oh, I'd love that.
So
that's great.
Really excited about that project.
Yeah, that's cool. Now, we can walk along if you want. Now, Did I hear that recently you visited some retreats, some writer retreats?
Oh yes, I had 2 fellowships this last winter. After I finished graduate school, I knew I needed time and empty space to go and write. So I applied and got accepted by 2 different residencies. So I spent 2 weeks in Virginia at the Virginia Center for Creative Arts. And then I had the incredible opportunity a month later to go to Wyoming, to outside of Sheridan, Wyoming, on a 1,000-acre cattle ranch. This woman decided to create an artist residency program, and she designed this beautiful, spectacular, modern house with 2 wings for a total of 6 artists, 3 on each wing, and then built studios for 4 artists at a time and 2 writers at a time.
Okay.
And we just showed up. All we had to do was get there.
Yeah.
They provided the house, everything we needed,
Meals.
wood for the wood stove, and then we cooked for ourselves. So they gave us money for groceries, and so it came down to we each made 1 really nice dinner a week, and then we ate our leftovers, and I wrote 12 new chapters for my memoir. So this is another example of taking a moment from life and it goes straight into a poem. It's called "The Day After She Finishes Driver's Ed, My Daughter Suddenly Notices I Write Poetry While Driving." "What are you doing? You can't write and drive." She's aghast, watching my pen scrawl across the open notebook on my lap as I drive one-handed north up Route 1. "Mimi, I've written nearly half of all my poems while driving since before you were born. When else can moms write poetry? I'm completely focused on the road, and another part of my mind is free to write. It's great." "I want all of your mind on the road. I don't want to die just because you have to write poetry." She pulls the paper and pen out of my grasp. "Mimi, it's not just for poems. It's for making grocery lists and making sure I don't forget things, like you need ballet shoes. And lots of people drive and eat. Please, may I have my pen and paper back?" "No. You can eat and drive, but no poetry," she says with determination as we continue up the coast. I'm left empty-handed, soothed by the billowing indigo wash of lupin and meadow grasses following the road. An expanse of white paper stretches out in my mind, and no way to etch the day across it. I have to be patient until I drive off alone and can once again save my life with poetry. Thank you.
Well, Elizabeth, thank you so much for allowing us to visit with you today.
It was really an absolute delight. Thank you so much. We never knew what we were going to find when we headed out.
It was a lot of fun.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, and continued good luck in your poetic career.
Thank you very much. All right.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. There's a kitty.
Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the show. But don't go away. I'm going to be showing you some poetry shorts next, over the next few minutes. Some poetry shorts by Jacob Fricke and Corinne Spitfire, 2 local poets here in Mid-Coast, Maine. Check it out.
The creative and vegetable principle of organic development creeps slowly into all things. Thirsty to break through cracks in pavement and make the concrete cities into jungles. Its expansion unchecked, it will surround you soon. The greatest subversionists are always unassuming.
Chair. The deerskin chair sat in the corner, angled between the fireplace and the bay window. It was the softest thing ever. My father shot the deer and upholstered the chair. I would curl up in it, rubbing my face across the arm and gingerly fingering the bullet hole, feeling how much I loved and hated him.
Glooming in vibrancy, the spirit of art told me something surreal recently. Canvas on white wall, the sad gallery, and suddenly, an echo of inexplicable combination, the place, the objects were transported into the realm of pure mind. I stepped out upon the sidewalk.
Play. When I weed, I play Vietnam. I defoliate. I push the hoe. I chop the heads off those weeds. I am a guillotine. I jab, stab, dig at their roots. Get the roots. Failing that, off with their heads. When I weed, I play fascism. Leave only the single row of baby carrots, beets, lettuce. Take away the chickweed, lamb's quarter, galgonzola, sourgrass, dandelions, ragweed, sorrel, nutritious edibles all. Leave only the basil. I go after those weeds with the hand hoe, the push hoe, the hula hoe. I turn my anger, my desire to be a terrorist, to gun down the boards of the Fortune 500 on the weeds. It does not matter. I could pull them out with loving kindness. It does not matter if I am weeping or laughing. They come up again or are replaced by others just the same.
I don't want to think about it. Years of careful thought have led to endless headache. My swollen mind has raised the challenge, and the blunt world has beaten it down. Silently creaking wheels of mental machinery, entire spheres of cogitation, just spinning in a circle of schematic sigils and diagrams. The foolish, billowy blast of intellect is mosh. I wielded my scholarly scalpel and Now my fingers are bleeding. My beaten and bruised mind now lies in the hospital, silently turning the one white thought, and even that is despair. No, don't ever let your mind go to your head.
Annuals. The downtown merchants feed the trees, plant petunia boxes. The garden club fixes post office square, perennializes, works the historical museum. The town pays over and over again for those bricks. Isn't it women who are supposed to be high maintenance?
In a white-walled room of concrete, 10 stories underground, beneath fluorescent lights and tubing, pipes, jungles of plumbing, deep in the bellies of machines. Clothes are being washed.